Right, so we're interrupting your afternoon to bring you a very important conversation. And remember, we've kept our eye on the entire movement of COVID cases in India, the treatment, the testing protocol, and everything else for a while now. It's now time to bring you information about a new drug that has been approved and launched in India by Biocon. Now, this drug is called Itolizumab. It used to be used on skin disease. It is now been cleared by the Drug Controller General of India to treat COVID patients of moderate and severe respiratory distress. Now, it's being called a life-saving drug. And from what I understand, every patient will need about 4 doses of this, and that amounts to about 32,000 rupees in total. But from some of the responses that we heard from the doctors in that online press conference, some doctors suggested that using this drug on time for the right patients could in fact avoid ventilators or the use of ventilators for patients, and that could perhaps bring down the cost of treatment in a great deal. We have a lot of questions about the drug, and to help to answer those questions, Ms. Kiran Mazumdar, who is the Chairman Managing Director of Biocon, joins me right now. Ms. Shaw, good afternoon, and thank you for giving my audience your time. I really appreciate it. I know this is a big day at Biocon. If you could first tell us, please, how the drug works. What does this drug do really when you give it to someone who's experiencing respiratory distress?
So Faye, first and foremost, thank you for having me on your show. And yes, this is a very proud moment for all of us at Biocon, because this is a drug that we have been developing for over 2 decades, or nearly 2 decades. So this is something which I in-licensed in early 2003. And then we basically developed it as an immunomodulating drug for psoriasis. And most recently, when the immunological understanding of COVID-related complications came into being, we thought that this is a drug that ideally can play a role in dealing with that cytokine storm that we call, that kills patients. So that's the background, but let me explain how it works. So, when the virus basically attacks any body, your body basically responds by producing antibodies. For some reason, this virus not only evokes that antibody response, but it also hyper-stimulates the T cells to keep releasing cytokines. So it's basically having a very strong immune response on your body. So apart from antibodies, you're also getting the T cells getting hyperactivated to produce what we call as cytokines. These cytokines are nothing but poison darts in layperson's language to really attack the virus. But when you have too much of cytokine production, it actually attacks your own cells and it kills the body instead, instead of just the virus. So this is why we have to deal with this cytokine storm in a very timely manner. So you have to understand the point at which this cytokine storm is beginning to develop. And so that's the point where you give this drug and stop the cytokine storm. So what this drug does is it actually starts blocking these little signals that the T cell is giving to produce cytokines, and those signals get blocked so that those cytokines don't get produced at all. And so the moment you give this drug, within 24 hours, you're seeing a complete downregulation of these cytokines, which is then saving the body, saving the patient, calming the immune system to allow it to fight naturally and get rid of the virus. And we are seeing some really outstanding results, because patients within a week are being weaned off, ventilators and masks, and within 2 weeks they're recovered and being discharged. I think this is a really outstanding development, because from a scientific point of view, from a scientific hypothesis point of view, this was going to work. But to see it actually work in patients is really something which is so heartening, because you saw at the press conference today that there were so many cases of doctors actually sharing their stories with you and talking about patients who have benefited. And although the trial itself had 20 patients, you can see that outside the trial, it's over 150 patients who have been benefited from this drug. So I think that's the big, statement we are making today. This is a made in India drug, an innovated in India drug, and it's a drug from India for the world. That's what makes us very proud, because this is the first original innovative drug, which is a first in class drug. There is no other company in the world that has an anti-CD6 antibody in its portfolio.
If I may just ask you a couple of questions about the trial that you just mentioned. The trial, as was noted by these doctors, had a total of 30 patients, which were, from what I understand, 2 were given the drug, 1 was not, which means that there were 20 out of those 30 patients that actually were given the drug. There are questions being raised about the scientific efficacy of this trial that only has 30 candidates in it, and the fact that these results, in comparison to trials across the world, won't really hold up as scientific conclusions. What is your response to that? Do you believe that a 30-member trial is enough that was conducted over a month or so?
I think the people who are making these comments don't understand clinical trials. This is an emergency clinical trial. If you look at all the emergency INDs in the US also, these are all abbreviated trials. You actually conduct these trials, and that too, this is not a new drug. This is an old drug which you're repurposing. So first and foremost, you are not going through the safety trials of any drug for this thing in the way you would normally do for a new drug. So since you have a lot of safety data, you actually piggyback on that. And the way the trial was designed was that you use statistical models to make sure that that the endpoints that you're choosing are statistically significant to allow you to approve those drugs in time. Because when you do an emergency trial in an emergency like this, the whole objective is to make the drug available to patients if there is any benefit. If you conduct much larger trials, then you deny the patient the drug for that much longer. So if we had to do a much larger trial, we would have had to delay the approval by another few months. And few months is a lot for patients. And you would have lost a lot more patients than you can now, and you can now actually save those patients. So statistically, it has actually withstood the statistical modeling that happens for either any rare disease or any orphan disease or an emergency use case. That is why it's called a restricted emergency approval. This is not a normal approval. And so from that point of view, what we have done is absolutely acceptable by any regulatory standard. And I think the kind of scientific rigor that was gone into this trial is of a very high order. So the kind of auditing, the statistical modeling that has gone into this trial, I can tell you it will stand the test of any international regulator.
The 150 patients, if I may ask, who were given the drug off-label, is that with the permission of the Drug Controller of India, the off-label trials that happened? And if not,
why? Let me explain to you. When a drug is approved in the country, it is up to the doctors to use any drug off-label. It is their prerogative. So, for instance, there is a drug called Tocilizumab, which is not approved. And they have not done any clinical trials, but it is an approved drug for another indication. So the doctors are using even Tocilizumab for COVID-19. So it is not wrong for doctors to use these kind of drugs off-label, and they don't need to take any permissions to do that. But now that they've done all these trials, we would like to gather the data from them, because that will also further strengthen our database.
We understand that the emergency approval that the Drug Controller General of India handed out was without a phase 4 trial. What does a phase 4 trial do? And what have we skipped by skipping that phase 4 trial?
Nobody skips phase 4. When any drug is approved, you are always asked to do a post-marketing study. A phase 4 is nothing but a post-marketing study, because then you are out of a controlled environment. So you're supposed to do a phase 4 study to show that when you actually use it in the real world setting, how do patients respond? what are the kind of, are you seeing any adverse events which you have not seen in the control, in the trial? So this is a standard procedure for any drug, irrespective of whether it is emergency approval or not. So any drug that is approved by any regulator in the world is requested to do what is called as a pharmacovigilance phase 4 study. It is nothing but capturing all the adverse events, if any, of that drug. So that's what is a phase 4 study.
And your commitment right now is that the use of the drug will continue to be studied and data will continue to be compiled in order to be able to present it to the international community. Is that correct?
This is not about international authorities. This is for the Indian regulator. The Indian regulator is saying that we are giving you emergency use, so please use it for the patients and save lives, but also please generate data and keep sharing it with us. So
for
that's
our audience,
phase 4 setting.
For our audience who've just tuned in, Biocon has received permission from clearance from the Drug Controller General of India for a drug called Itolizumab to treat COVID patients who are in respiratory distress. You did talk about the fact that the focus for you here is to make the drug available as quickly as possible. Are you already mass producing it, and how quickly will it be available across the country?
Well, the product is available and has been available for many years. So it's not like we don't make the product, and it's not like it is not available. But obviously now the demand is going to ramp up. And the up until now, the requirement for this drug was not at such large scale. So we obviously have to ramp up production now. Now that we've got approval, we realize that we'll have to ramp up production because there is a huge demand. And we expect this demand to go beyond India, because I think every country is being challenged by deaths and there are no drugs that are as efficacious as Itolizumab. And because of the mechanism of action, we believe that there is going to be a large interest in this drug from all countries that are impacted by high levels of mortality. And we have also, this particular drug actually, because of the mechanism of action, although we developed it for psoriasis in India, I had licensed it to a US company because there are many other indications, because it's not about just using it for one indication. This is about an immunomodulating effect that will be required in many indications. So for instance, right now, our US partners are conducting trials as we speak in acute graft versus host disease in the US. They are conducting a trial for lupus nephritis, and they are conducting a trial for acute asthma in Australia. So, I mean, this is happening as we speak. But now that they've seen the data from COVID-19, I think they also feel that we should now start doing it in the US, because US cases are spiking and their mortality rates are also going up. So they feel that this is something which we must do rapidly in the US. So they will also apply for an emergency IND and seek emergency use approval in the US for this drug by conducting a suitable clinical trial.
Vishwa, if I may ask you also a couple of other questions about India's fight with COVID right now. I do understand that you were part of a committee that put together the initial testing protocol and the pricing on testing in India. Enough is being said at this point about the fact that we're not testing enough per million. India has not ramped up. We've ramped up testing from where we were, but globally, in comparison to the rest of the world, we're still not doing enough. Do you agree that we should be testing more? And that's probably where the problem lies?
Absolutely. I think we are under testing in a big way. And I think this is something I had talked about right from the very beginning. I was one of those loud voices that used to say that we're not testing enough. We are basically, displaying an ostrich syndrome by saying that we don't have big numbers because we are not testing. And I think it's important. Now it's all coming out because we haven't tested enough and we are seeing numbers surge as we test. So the test positive rates actually tell you whether you're testing enough or not. So if the test positive rates were very low, then it means that for every 100 tests, only 2 or 3 people are testing positive. Today, the test positive rates are surging and to as high as 40 per 100, which means that because you haven't tested for such a long time, every time you test, somebody is testing positive. So you do need to up your testing in a big way. And the point is that you need to have a very good testing protocol, which actually uses multiple ways of testing. So, right, it's not just RT-PCR testing. You need serological testing, both using antibody and antigen testing. You do need to use ELISA and CLIA testing of antibodies because that's much more reliable than the point of care strip tests that everyone's talking about. But you can use all this in a very, very well orchestrated model. And I think there are enough models available for testing protocols that we can adopt without having to reinvent the wheel. But this is something we should have done a long time ago. And now we are kind of scrambling to get all this done today. And that's the reason why we are in the situation we are today. And I hope that, better sense will prevail and that everyone will start testing more. You can see that ICMR had put a complete halt on allowing free testing of people. Free, when I say, I don't mean free as in money, but in terms of allowing people to test themselves. They were only allowing symptomatic patients to be tested. And they said if it's asymptomatic, they will test. But today, everything has been freed up. Because I think Maharashtra was the first state to say, no, we are going to allow anybody who wants to be tested to be tested. And now other states are also following. So I think, we have been very slow to recognizing the need for more testing. And now that we are now going to see more testing.
Well, I do want to ask you this. You are in Bangalore currently. That's my hometown. And we've seen this happen to a lot of cities where, we locked down very early. Then the unlocking happened. And then we've seen a surge. And now Bangalore's locking down again starting tomorrow. Pune is locking down again. Chennai is locking down again. It's happening across the country. Was the lockdown per se badly timed? Because it seems like other countries managed to capture the curve maybe better than we did.
No, I think, Faye, we did a great job of the lockdown. Now, any lockdown is a phase of preparedness. Okay, so when you see numbers surging, you lock down so that it gives you time to manage the spread and then to be proactive about how do you manage it when you unlock. Now, Karnataka did a great job during the lockdown because they would pounce on every single outbreak. And they would contain it, they would create buffer zones, they would quarantine, they would trace. So, as you know, the real formula you have to use is test, track, trace, triage, and treat, right? That's really the continuum of care for COVID or managed care for COVID. Now, what happened was in Karnataka, we were doing all of this extremely efficiently during the lockdown. The biggest blunder that Karnataka made was that after they lifted the lockdown, they found that when they were testing in the first week, they were seeing the same number of tests that they had seen the previous week, right, before the lockdown. And they thought, oh, now everything is solved, we're in a good shape, so we don't have to test so much. And they took their eye off the ball and they basically said, okay, now let's just test symptomatic cases. So they started adopting the ICMR protocol saying we should only test symptomatic cases. And they stopped testing the people, they stopped contact tracing for some reason. So when they used to have a positive case, in the past, they would do such extensive contact tracing that for every one person, they had something like 28 contact traced people. They suddenly dropped that to 4 because they would only contact trace up to the family. And that was a big blunder because then with that, you lowered your testing, right? And you reduced your contact tracing. And so you didn't know where the outbreaks were happening. You didn't know where this infection was spreading. And by the time they realized that the numbers were surging, it was too late. So now, of course, they're ramping up testing. They're again locking down. They want to reintroduce the containment and buffering zones. But I wish they had done it effectively even while they were unlocking. Kerala has done that very well. So that's why you're seeing that even though they've unlocked, the numbers are not huge.
I do want to ask you about India's response right now to China, which is, over and above the COVID problem that we're already handling. Several of the Chinese imports were held up in our ports by customs for many, many days and caused challenges to many industries, including the pharma industry that depends on, some compounds, coming in from China. Do you believe that that sort of a move was helpful, especially at a time when we're battling a healthcare crisis?
Faye, personally, holding up Chinese imports at our ports doesn't help. If you were to say that no more imports from China, certainly that's a good retaliation. But also we must remember that when you're dependent solely on one country for raw materials, you have to do it in a calibrated way. Like for instance, what hurts least is to ban apps. I think that was a good retaliation because that really doesn't hurt you in the way that a pharmaceutical import can hurt you. But personally, I felt that, trying to kind of hold up things at our ports was not going to be exactly helping anyone, and it would actually hurt us.
Are things better now? Are you getting access to the imports from China?
I think things are improved, but I think there is a need and an effort to make sure that our reliance on one country does not ever happen again. I think you must multi-source. And I think it's also important to have your own indigenous capabilities, but you also have to multi-source.
And that was going to be my next question. The idea that we should be able to make all phases of our drugs or all stages of pharmaceuticals in India, what would we need to get there? Why are we having to buy it from China right now? What are we missing?
We have the capabilities. I think it's just about having enabling policies. For instance, why did we cede this position or surrender this position to China? We actually were making all these pharmaceutical products from end to end. And then somewhere about 20 years ago, we decided, well, no, China, we decided it's better to let China make it because China was doing it cheaper than us. And of course, this was not just our doing, but it was the fact that we were actually exporting a lot of our pharmaceutical products. And obviously there was cost cutting. And we suddenly found that companies who were importing stuff from China were able to compete more effectively than those who were not. So eventually we shut down all the intermediate and API production in a very big way in India and surrendered it to China. Now we realize that that was, in hindsight, a very, very harmful and foolish thing to do. And so today we're trying to rebuild those sectors. We have the capabilities. I think this is a great opportunity for SMEs to start making those intermediates, key starting materials. I think it's going to be very big an opportunity for many, many companies. I think the big pharma, of course, is going to be very dependent. So you can create a huge ancillary industry that can supply a big Indian pharma with all these critical components.
Is it necessary, in your opinion, as someone who's run a business now for so many decades, is it necessary for us to really improve our ease of doing business in order to make that happen? Because process is punishment in India, we all know. Just the paperwork is enough to turn someone off doing a business like this. What's your advice right now on process?
So Faye, I belong to a sector which is over-regulated. Okay, you have no idea how many ministries we have to deal with. And at the last count, we had, I think, 1,800 compliance boxes to tick. Okay. And if I go through the regulatory tick box, that's even higher. So I'm actually involved with one initiative which the government itself is partnering with private sector for, to bring about ease of regulations, to bring about regulatory reforms. So I think this is a very important exercise because the cost of doing business is also about the regulatory complexity of doing business. Regulatory complexity actually adds to cost of doing business. And added to that, of course, you've got this whole cost of doing business exercise, which I just talked about. Half of the regulatory steps or the kind of processes that we need to go through for conducting business in India can be got rid of. In fact, now that we've been thrown into the digital world, we have actually come up with a very good proposal to the government saying, look, digital platforms allow you parallel processing. It allows you to do deemed approvals, automatic approvals. It gives you a virtual single window to do things with. And you can do everything by cutting short time by doing all this. In fact, in the regulatory process itself, we have been able to, in many cases, shave off anywhere between 200 to 400 days of regulatory procedures, which is a lot, So if you can shave off of a year or two of a regulatory procedure, I think you can see what it can do for the business. You can take your product faster from the lab to the market. Now, adding to that are the other business procedural requirements, which also need to be shaved off. So if you use the same principles of parallel processing instead of sequential processing, if you can use virtual single windows, we always talk about single windows, but they never happen. Today on a digital platform, it's very easy to share information, knowledge, application, submissions on one platform. And it can, through software, very cleverly transfer that data into sub-portals. So I think all this is extremely important and we should not lose this opportunity. So I, for one, believe that finally, ease of doing business and regulatory ease can finally happen very rapidly.
You also, at a time when most businesses in most sectors are reeling under the impact of the lockdown, people are losing jobs across the board. You very optimistically said that you believe the pharma sector can be India's next IT sector or India's next big outsourcing opportunity. Would you explain to us where your confidence comes from?
See, if you take India's healthcare sector as a whole, it's already over $100 billion in size. If you take India's pharmaceutical industry, this itself is close to $50 billion in size. Okay. And $15 billion, we have almost $25 billion of exports that are taking place from India. We are the largest vaccine producers in the world. We are the largest APIs and generic formulations producers in the world. So we have all the components and ingredients of making huge global impact. And, the healthcare sector globally is a very, very important component. It's a huge sector. And it's a $8 trillion sector for the world, okay, the healthcare sector. I, for one, believe that we can make this into $500 billion sector just for India if we do things right. So from 100 billion, we can easily become $5 billion by 2030. And this includes, of course, the hospital sector, the pharmacy sector, the whole ecosystem of healthcare. And the Indian pharmaceutical sector itself can become a $100 billion sector very easily. Okay, we can double in size in the next, by 2030. So I personally believe that we must encourage this particular sector, and we can become a formidable sector if we really play our cards well. So if we want to create a $100 billion pharmaceutical sector out of this $500 billion healthcare sector, then we have to have the same kind of SOPs that the IT sector enjoyed. And the IT sector has done a tremendous job, because today it's almost a $200 billion sector for India. It's close to that. And it already contributes more than 2.5% to GDP. So if that's the kind of contribution the IT sector is making for the country, and in terms of the job creation, the GDP contribution, and the growth, it's enjoyed all this because of the SOPs it enjoyed in the early stages. We have reached a Y2K point in pharmaceuticals. This pandemic has showed up to the world that they need low-cost healthcare. India is at that inflection point where whether it's vaccines, drugs, or healthcare, we can do it for the world. And I think we should not lose this opportunity.
I have a last question for you. There are 2 points of view right now on India's battle with COVID. One of which says that we're at 8.5 lakh cases. We're adding a lakh cases every couple of days right now. Things couldn't be worse than where they are. There's another point of view, largely being also advocated by the health ministry, the Union Health Ministry, that says out of 1.3 billion, 8.5 lakh is not bad. Also look at the active cases, don't look at the total cases. It's how you look at the numbers. Do you believe that 8.5 lakh total cases is something to worry about and is not, I mean, we shouldn't be patting ourselves on the back just yet saying that, look what a fantastic job we've done with managing this problem?
So Faye, yes, we are almost close to 1 million cases. And for a country of 1.3 billion, it's a very small number. I agree with that. But is 1 million the right number is the question. We still don't know whether this has spread to our rural reaches, okay? And I do believe that we need to be realistic, that for a country of our size, we should expect a larger number than where we are today. But if you're in a state of preparedness, I don't think you should worry. Because if you have an opportunity to pounce on every outbreak and contain it and quarantine it and deal with it in the way I just described, then I don't think you will see a huge surge in numbers. I mean, you will see a surge, but not at this, or not at some of those forecasts that have been made.
Yes.
So you constantly have to look out for, with true testing. I mean, you cannot be under testing and say that we don't have more than so many cases, which is what has happened in the past. I think you have to have a model that measures true metrics of the key hotspots in the country. And if you can measure the outbreaks in those hotspots and see whether it's decreasing day by day, and more importantly, if you can show that your death rates are declining and your mortality rates are declining, you will be in a much better shape.
Right. Ms. Shaw, thank you so much for spending time with me and my audience and answering all of these questions. I wish you very good luck to the new drug. And we look forward to the work that you're doing in this sector. Thank you for speaking.